Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us. Bennett and I will be covering tips on how to successfully complete a virtual interview. So the first thing I want to mention, before the initial interview, just make sure that you've actually practiced with someone and get feedback from that person, whether it be a family member, a trusted friend. Ask them to run through the mock interview process with you using your virtual interview technology. So make sure that you test the technology to minimize the distractions that you'll have. So whether it be TVs in the background, make sure that your phone's put away because those things can definitely distract from you in that interview process. So make sure that it isn't your first run through with that programming. Make sure that you're comfortable using it, whether it's Skype, whether it's Google Hangouts, Zoom, which is very popular now. Make sure that you know how to use that material before that interview actually starts or takes place. The second point I want to cover is to make sure that you sit down prepared. So don't surf the web, even though your computer is open to conduct the interview. We want to make sure that you aren't flipping back and forth between tabs. Make sure that you do your research for that company before the interview actually takes place. So the same thing that you would do before you go into a face-to-face interview. You can prepare notes beforehand. Just make sure that you have that information based on that company so that you can go in prepared as best as possible. And as you can see, Bennett and I are dressed for success today. So just because the interview may take place virtually doesn't mean that you can wear what you would wear on a normal day. You do want to look professional. It shows that you are ready for the interview and that you respect the interviewer and the company. So as we stated before, don't dress for the job. You want to dress for the interview. So always dress professionally. My next point with your greeting, even though you can't physically make contact with that person virtually with a handshake, which is what we normally do in our greeting, you want to make sure that it's very positive, that you're welcoming, that you have that smile to show that you do appreciate that interviewer's time for conducting that interview with you on that day. So those are all basic points when leading up to the interview before the interview actually starts. So you've made it past the greeting, sitting down with the interviewer at your computer, getting your information set up. You're all prepared to get ready to answer those questions. And we know the first most common question that someone will ask is for you to tell them about yourself. And we do that briefly with the elevator pitch. So you want to make sure that you highlight your years and time of experience, your field of interest, your attributes, and then your passion for that position. So you don't want to tell them about your animals, how old you are, how many kids you have. You want to stay out of the weeds and avoid giving too much information. So you want to stay on topic and make sure that you're covering that answer to the best of your ability, but keeping it short and sweet and making sure that it's concise. Reasons for leaving. So this can be kind of difficult to answer, but your reasons for leaving can be a number of different things. You just want to make sure that you avoid red flags. So you don't want to say that you had a bad supervisor or boss that you didn't get along with and you decided to leave and find something else. You always want to make it seem as if it is something that you wanted to pursue. So if it's a better job opportunity that you're looking for, if it's, the contract ended, those are all good reasons for leaving. You don't want to badmouth a supervisor, a boss, any coworkers. You don't want to say anything negative about that organization or company that you worked for before. So make sure that you're avoiding those red flags when it comes to reasons for leaving. Another point is, and we find this with integrity and positive growth. So typically employers will ask about the criminal history or work gaps. So if someone asks you about your criminal history and you do have a criminal record, the step up standard is to share that information at that time, but you want to do it using a specific formula. You want to highlight what happened during that time, but also what you've done to move on from that and what you've learned from that. So the back end of your statement should be the longest, with things that you're currently doing, and things that you've learned from making those mistakes. So you want to definitely share that information with the employer, because if they do the background check and you hadn't shared it, that shows that you're being dishonest or that you were trying to hide something. So definitely share that. Even if the employer doesn't ask, if you know that you have a criminal record and something might come up, just be open and honest with them and share that with them, because a lot of employers will respect that. And then there's also typical questions with work-related examples where they would come into play. So someone may ask you to tell about a time where you had a difficult customer, especially if you're in the customer service. They want to know how you alleviated that situation or what you did to solve that problem. So using work-related examples, making sure that they have the happy endings, exemplifying your personal strengths. So you always want to use a work-related example that is positive. You never want to use an example that had a negative effect or nothing was resolved. So make sure that all of your work-related examples end with the positive effect. My next point would be questions for the employer. So a lot of people feel that, they shouldn't ask questions, that they should know the information from the company going into that interview. So they feel, some people may even feel intimidated to ask questions, especially if your nerves are getting the best of you. You may be ready to get out of there and just be done with the interview. So make sure that you're asking good questions for the employer. You want to ask about the company and not about yourself. So anything that's self-serving, as far as time off, benefits, whether it's health, dental, vision, anything like that, you want to leave out of questions, because that deals with yourself. You want to ask questions about the company. I think it's even fine to ask, do you have goals set for your new hires within the first 30, 60, or 90 days? What are the next steps in the hiring process? That shows that you're concerned about that position and that you're not concerned about how that position will benefit you. Which kind of ties to my next point. It kind of goes hand in hand. So when it comes to the salary, our step-up standard is to not ask about the salary. So if an employer asks you, what are your salary expectations? We say it's always best to say that you're open and flexible. It shows that you personally care about the position and getting the job done, and it doesn't matter about the pay. And we know that pay can be negotiated, so you definitely don't want to mention that in the first interview. And some employers may ask you about salary ranges, but just give them that pushback that, you're there for the job, so you remain open and flexible. So after the interviewer has asked you all of their questions that they have for you, and you've asked them the questions that you have for them, you definitely want to make sure that you have a way of following up with them. So after a virtual interview, you want to make sure that you send an email follow-up within the first 24 hours to each individual that was met. So if you met with one person, send them an email telling them that you appreciate their time and consideration for you for that position, and that you're definitely interested. It shows that you really want the position, and it keeps the interviewer with you at the forefront of their nominations for candidates for that position. And last but not least, just make sure that you have good volume, tone, pace, that you breathe throughout the interview, because it can be stressful, and that as hard as it is, try to smile as much as possible. A good smile can go a long way.